Hello everybody and welcome back, ready for round 2 here at the Bremen Regional Championships. I'm Connor Hayward, joining me is Amy. Good round 1 that.
Absolutely fantastic. A great matchup with two fantastic players.
Yeah, and not only that, but it also gets us going for the day. You see 2 of the decks, you see how the new variants of the decks have come into play. And I think we're going to see another new variant of a kind of classic deck coming up right now, which made us go, huh, really? When we saw the list.
I'm so excited. This one's going to be awesome, guys.
So we will be going into the game shortly. I think players are both set up. We'll have Owyn Kamerman versus Roberto Sanchez. And both of these players are 1-0. So it's like nice, good start for both players. Solid starts. There were quite a few no-shows, which is a bit of a shame.
For round 1.
But they are basically ready. And as we see it, everyone's basically ready to go, bar the prize cards. And we'll see Owyn on the left. As you see the prize cards come down, will be telling us kind of what he's playing. He's playing the RCS Bees. I know Amy just did a little fist pumping. No one else saw that, but Amy was like, hell yeah, let's go with the Bees. And Roberto is going to have an issue.
There's a thigh in their prize cards.
I mean, yeah. So this is an issue for us at this format, right? In that technically with RCS, any attacker is good. But we're going to see potentially a RCS Mewtwo v Union come into play at some point as Owyn gets us underway in the round, discarding the quick ball to get us started, getting rid of a grass energy. He's playing a few copies, so can afford to do so. Also, you only really need 1 KO with a bead roll at some point to get the value.
The interesting thing is their prize cards, though, because they've got 2 mustard and 1 bee in the prize cards.
This is true, and I'm just going to double check their list. They're playing 3 mustard, so
there is still a bee potential, but is Roberto running any special energy today?
Well, we'll find out.
That'll be the interesting tell to whether our Bumblebee's going to be doing its sting or not.
But as we get underway, this first search is always so vital for a player. You know, they get so much information going through their list, double checking, okay, what's prized? And especially in these kind of toolboxy decks like Owyn's. Owyn's is like, not strictly speaking, a RCS bead roll list. It's got a few other techs in there as well. So this is super valuable information. Go through, find what's prized, and get yourself a little bit of.
Yes, absolutely. Clearly a really strong draw engine in these games. If you're using the Bidoof engine well, you're going to be drawing through most of your deck in your game, which is perfect, especially because Owyn's running a lot of different cards, which we won't spoil. We'll wait and keep you guys on your toes to see what pops out of this deck.
Yeah, and also had the real ideal energy attachment, right? You want to get that double turbo energy down early, get it established, mean that you're basically one attachment to get from rolling, because once the RCS V-Star is rolling, it's really easy to keep that chain ticking over, as you'll see the escape rope from Roberto. But looks like a sort of awkward hand. Is going to be able to get away with the Ultra Ball. Did have to discard a second energy there, so one of the double turbo energies is gone.
And of course, ideally, Roberto's going to be wanting to use their strong discard power with something like Ultra Ball to ideally be getting rid of V-Union pieces, not some energy, well, really. But both players have started with an Arceus, which is really strong. Bidoof's there holding the fort on Owyn's side in the active, while Arceus is getting ready. Luminion.
Yeah, so one of those cards that we've seen sort of creeping back into lists for that ability to search for supporters. But one of the cool things with Luminion is that there's actually 2 copies here for Roberto. I think just to help that extra consistency, especially because he's a list that can accumulate the V-Union parts in hand, Luminion, get a research, cool, we're set up. But what will be interesting now is, since we see the thigh prized, it will become basically impossible for him to establish that.
Yes, so Mewtwo V-Union won't be being played unless that thigh is acquired.
Yeah, so he is playing Adventurous Discovery, which I think is a way of getting that out of the prize cards, if I remember. I don't play V-Union cards.
No, Adventurous Discovery lets you take 3 Vs.
Okay.
So they've gone for their Arceus V-Star, they've gone for another Arceus V, and a Zapdos V there.
Yeah, so but does have basically the rest of a toolbox available, right? It's not as if they're completely locked in on the V-Union strategy. I think that's their highlight piece. If they can pull that off, that will win them games. But here, they have the threat of the Galarian Zapdos just ready to go. Cool, you've got to go get your Dunsparce now and avoid going too wide on the bench, because otherwise it's going to be really efficient for me, as we see the powering up using the RCS V's attack.
Yeah, threatening the Zapdos really valuable in making Owyn have to use resources and bench space to combat that. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do it. Roberto's strategy with this is clear in this battle, and he'll know he doesn't have that thigh yet, so if he's going to be able to do the V-Union, it's certainly not yet. The only way they'd be able to get that out of the prizes is playing Peonia. I'm not sure they run it.
No, I didn't see any copies in the list, as we'll see Owyn just continue quick balling, try and thin this hand down before you're going to fill it back up with those industrious incisors for barrel later. But we'll see that, like we were saying, Owyn's list is not a strict, like, it's a weird little RCS toolboxy, that kind of thing almost, I wanted to call it, versus like a RCS any particular attacker, because there's just so many different options in there. Nice to see the Oranguru in combination with that barrel.
It takes real skill to run a toolbox deck like this that has so many different options, because for every single matchup, especially an unusual one like Roberto is providing, you're going to be looking for the ideal solution. You have to think on the spot for that. There's no way Owyn can learn every single possible matchup, every single combination of cards. And Roberto is definitely challenging that idea today.
So we'll see that industrial incisors come down and into a poker gear. Basically trying to find a way to get either this barrel out of the active or get into the V-star, because that will also get the barrel out the active, but doesn't look like an out found. Only supporters there were Raihan's and Boss's orders, which maybe you can stall for a turn, try and get the Luminion stuck in the active, but that's only one attachment away, and the RCSV is powered up and ready to go. So
it is, and the Luminion only has one retreat cost, and air balloons are being played. So theoretically, and no V-Star abilities have been being used yet, so there's a potential that it would be easy for the Luminion to come back as well. So is it worth burning a boss's orders for
So now we'll see the Primate Wisdom from Oranguru, just to swap the top card. Effectively draw the card a turn early. And shuffle again, reset. Like when you know you've put a dead card back on top of your deck, if you have the ability to shuffle it back in, extra valuable. Looks like Owyn might have to be going for the Luminion or Crobat of his own. Does he want to commit to using his supporter for turn? Does he think there's a better supporter to use? He's playing things like the research, so he could go grab it. He could maybe land on a Marnie. So might still want to try and hit back into a boss if he can, but going with the Crobat now. And has to commit wide to bench, which does start making Roberto's Zapdos even scarier. And Owyn's not actually playing any copies of the Dunsparce. As we see Air Balloon. But we didn't see an out. So now we're going into the Marnie.
Took them a long time to get to any sort of usable supporter there. They were happy to commit to this turn.
Marnie, great card in these early turns as well, because it does give you an edge, gives you something to work with, reducing hand size for the opponent. And Ultra Ball found. Okay, so we will now see the
V-Star.
The V-Star. Getting rid of a couple more grass energy. I think maybe they figured probably not likely that they're playing at too high a special energy count outside of the double turbos.
No, and they are playing Raihan. It's not impossible to get that back. But the air balloon on the B-barrel as well is essential, really. It's got such a high retreat cost. It's a pain for two, especially when it doesn't have a usable attack particularly. Unless you'd like to take that risk of a coin flip.
So flips the V-Star marker, now gets to use the incredibly powerful ability to search their deck for any two cards that they wish. And this is basically the point where the deck says, cool, I've probably got everything I need now to have one big turn. And if I have one big turn now, it's going to put you in a horrible spot for the next couple of turns. If we can take a KO here or something along those lines, right?
But can the Zapdos kick back? That's going to be the scary part. Always that threat of the Zapdos on the bench.
And just pokes with the Zigzagoon. Do we have knockout as a result? We do indeed.
With the Choice Belt and one ping from a Zigzagoon or an Inteleon. Yep, we've got it. That double turbo energy Only has the -20, which is lovely.
And that will be the KO. So does, however, leave this Zapdos kind of exposed. But the cool thing with the RCS is that if you get KO'd once, it's not the end of the world because you just set up another one anyway. So will be interesting to see the back and forth now as Roberto has the Galarian Zapdos V ready and it is able to attack.
And with a really full bench from Owyn as well, so they can't do much more now. But there goes the Starburst. So both players have now used up that ability.
Yeah. The return of once per game mechanics, I think, like the tag team, like the stuff with the GX is I think a really cool thing to bring into the game because it's an extra real skill tester, and especially when it has these kinds of effects of like, go choose 2 cards. You have a lot of options, which is a lot of potential for making brilliant, correct plays. So Roberto now going in, basically wants to make sure he can establish a couple of attackers because KOing here is all well and good, but if there's a response KO back on this Zapdos V, things start getting a little shaky.
Absolutely, and with only one backup attacker on the bench, admittedly it's got an energy, but lacking acceleration options right now for that energy.
So goes back in and search.
Discovery.
And can now go basically build the board again. Interesting inclusion when you're playing stuff like...
Oh, here we go. Oh, and Owyn's finally spotted the first set of V-Union pieces, having a quick glance at those attacks, as admittedly we had to.
Yeah, I can imagine that being a very common scenario where you have to go, excuse me, how do these things work?
And they're counting how many V-Union pieces they've already managed to get in there.
Yeah.
There we go, from an Ultra Ball and a Quick Ball. They've discarded 3 pieces already. So Owyn's probably shaking in their boots a little bit, not realising Roberto possibly doesn't have that third.
Well, this is the thing, and I think
piece.
I like this line from Roberto, knowing he's going to take 2 prize cards, right? By basically putting 3 in there, knowing that you have a 1/3 chance of hitting it this turn. If you hit this, you can discard. Then your next Arceus, which you could promote after the Zapdos gets KO'd, starts powering it up.
Absolutely. Or, worst comes to worst, the V-Union can accelerate to itself from discard.
So will be interesting if this gets to stick, but we obviously still see the one leg is just hanging out in the prize cards, and Owyn's gone back for another read to be like, but wait, what?
Owyn's deck, as it stands with a full bench, cannot one-hit KO
No.
the Mewtwo V-Union. So it's a very interesting deck choice at the present. I believe they have things in their deck that can do it, but we're not seeing that on bench. It's certainly going to take a few turns to power anything up.
Yeah, I mean, it is weak to dark, so it does still fall into the trap of the dark box kind of weaknesses, but Owyn's not playing the dark type attackers. He's playing things like Flygon, the Urshifu, and then the Mustard package. So not a huge amount of options for him to take out the V-Union if it hits the board. But we'll just see the KO with the Galarian Zapdos V here, going back to 4 prizes apiece. Back at parity now as Owyn goes ahead, V-Star comes down and shuffles in a couple of energy and the next Arceus. This is what this deck is really designed to do, right? Is get rolling. You use the first, use the V-Star to basically guarantee that you keep rolling for the rest of the game. And from here on, should just keep ticking over, powering up your next fairly tanky attacker. But it just does still need a little bit of work to take a couple of KOs back to back.
Yeah, I think it really could go either way still in this game. We know the V-Union can't come out yet, so that's not as much of a threat as it seems. Owyn can't one-hit KO it if it does come out, so that's going to be slightly tougher for them. But then Arceus with no DTE can take out a Zapdos, so again we are seeing that return back.
So this Arceus does get to take the KO because without having the double turbo energy on it, does do enough damage to respond to this Galarian Moltres, Galarian Zapdos, sorry, as we see. And goes down to 2 prize cards remaining. Will be interesting to see, do they take double mustard, or do they end up with like a mustard and a Beedrill? No, it's double mustard. So if we see a special energy come into play and a KO this turn, that does give the potential for a one-hit knockout for the game.
Yeah, Owyn's in a bit of a strange one because their bench is full and they have double mustard in hand. And your hand must be empty to play that mustard. So they're going to need at least one thing that removes the mustard from their hand, thins their hand down, removes one Pokemon from the bench if it isn't KO'd.
No.
Could get dicey.
And looking at the list, I don't know how many options they still have. They have their quick balls, they have their ultra balls, but they don't have any. They don't have as many like insta play cards as to thin the deck as and the handout as maybe you would expect in these kinds of lists. But Roberto now is able to attack with the RCS into the active, but before that we'll see the Fog Crystal, one of probably the best ball search cards because it's free, it's flexible, there's no cost for discarding. Grabs.
It's interesting that Roberto decided to play that Articuno, so they're ready at any point in time to discard that extra V-Union piece if they manage to get it. They don't need to have a discard option in hand anymore.
Yep. But what we're going to see now is KO on this Crobat and hope to hit those two pieces, right? I think that's the play here, is by bossing here, is if you can take these two prizes and grab the Union part, you're all good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to take Owyn a couple of turns to deal with that. It's not going to take Roberto too much time, hopefully, to attach to it. But yeah, their deck's looking quite thin as well, so they are running out of options too.
But I think the Luminion is in danger too of basically Owyn being able to boss it 4 games. So we'll see what happens. But
and with double Luminion, that becomes an increasing concern for future matches.
And we'll see the Trinity Nova and the boss, and that is indeed the end of game 1. So Owyn takes game 1 with the quick boss on a Luminion. And I think that was a really interesting matchup because you can see that these two decks are playing differently. They're trying different things. They're trying to make sure that they kind of have engines available to them and have options at all times.
They're both slightly toolboxy, well, one of them quite heavily so, toolbox decks. So it's interesting to watch them work around each other and dance that dance.
No, exactly. And the very nature of if you hit the V-Union and you can get that V-Union down, I was actually just double checking the attacks. So there are a few good options on that V-Union. Super Regeneration heals 200 from it. So, that makes it extraordinarily tanky. Doesn't do any damage, but then Final Burn for 300. Well, that's KOing basically everything. Then we also had the Size Explosion, which was your favorite attack name.
Yes.
Which is 16 damage counters wherever you like, which really adds up.
Well, that can KO a Luminion, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can just snipe it from the bench.
That's terrifying. So the flexibility with that Mewtwo is fantastic. And healing 200, that's healing all damage from an Arceus without a belt.
Yep. It doesn't do any damage back, but the very fact that you can just kind of go, cool, keep hitting me.
Yeah, use me as a punching bag. Go for it.
I'll do this all day.
If you have nothing else on bench and that V-Union inactive, an Arceus cannot touch you sideways.
No, exactly.
You just keep going.
So will be interesting to see if we can get that come down for Roberto game 2. But we did see that's one of the weaknesses with the V-Union stuff. And I think this is something that people were talking about when they were revealed, is unfortunately prizes exist in Pokemon. And that means that occasionally you're not going to get to play them because a part will be stuck.
Yeah, which is why I think it's an interesting, well, not a tech card, but an interesting backup attacker.
Yeah.
Because you're not relying on it as your primary use of winning. It's not your primary win condition to get that down, but it's certainly, if you do manage to get it rocking, it's certainly going to be scary.
Hey, it's you in the active position.
Oh, heck yes.
So, looks like Roberto starting, also including the toolboxy stuff of the Sylveon in their list, but the Pumpkaboo chilling out in the active spot. Not ideal, but at least we get to see a Pumpkaboo on stream today.
Yeah, one of my favourite Pokemon. It's lovely to see extra little fan favourites in decks, as I was saying last game. It's such a fun little card to use for starting to control the stadium situation in game, but certainly not a Pokemon we want to see first.
No, and also I hope everyone at home also flipped their heads upside down to be able to read Roberto's prize cards as they are flipped. But
Yeah,
it doesn't look like, I don't see any body parts.
No, they do have their full V-Union. However, their discard options for those V-Union parts are now limited, with 2 of their Ultra Balls and 1 of their Quick Balls in prizes. So it might be a little bit more difficult without maybe the assistance of Articuno to retrieve those pieces and then get them in the discard. But that's why we play Adventurer's Discovery, because they can search them.
Yeah, and now we are in to Owyn's turn, grabbing the RCS V and having the research. Lovely. Like, getting these early draw supporters is kind of key for all these decks, and also just drew into the double turbo energy, which is the ideal attachment turn 1, right? Roberto has an energy on a Zapdos, but you're not worried because it can't attack for 1 right now because it depends on how big your bench is. So, providing you can keep your bench small, you can get the attachment down now. Kind of bide time for next turn, and then you can push it in next turn and try and take KOs.
Roberto having a good look at Owyn's prizes there, because I'm not sure Owyn didn't get the B on bench, and I don't believe there was one in their prize cards, in the discard pile last game, so I don't know if Roberto was aware of the B in this matchup, because the Mustard didn't play either.
Beware.
Oh!
As we see a V-Union come down as well. So it's not V-Unions, they're on my mind. As you see the second RCSV come down, sorry. Basically, getting the bench ready, still has the Mew ability, which is what we'll see here. Grabbing Ultra Ball, beautiful pickup because this guarantees us the V-Star next turn if we want it. We can also use it to go grab other bits and pieces now, like we can go grab a barrel if we wanted to. But I love holding that, basically go, cool, you know I've got this.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do about it? As we'll see the Lumineon come down for Roberto.
The Mew's a nice start for Owyn. It's not one of those cards that you think, oh, crumbs. That's not great to start with because the Mew has a lot of early game usability. It is helping them set up. It's not too vulnerable as a single prizer, but has a really fantastic ability.
Yeah, and is playing 3 copies. It's kind of the extra tool that some people use for consistency, as if RCS wasn't consistent enough anyway. By adding in the Mew, you can get some extra cards to get you going earlier on in the game. We do see the lone Bidoof prize actually for Owyn, I just checked. So this is Roberto's turn to go and grab the V-Union parts should they want to and get binning.
Absolutely. I do like the Sylveon in this list a lot as well. Any list where you're playing lots of different types, you should consider playing the Sylveon.
Yes.
It does bring that power. And the ability's not bad either.
No, exactly. And it just gives you those flex attack options, which we're seeing a lot of, right? We've seen the Galarian Zapdos V, which originally was just considered the Eternatus counter, become more of a thing because of Arceus. We then have things like Sylveon, the Galarian Moltres V. So we're seeing more people splash different attackers, which makes deck building way more interesting because you have so many more things to play around.
Absolutely, and we see them going heavy for the V-Union pieces here.
Yeah, they're going in.
Oh, I'm excited. Here he comes.
I just want to see a mess of the board because I don't think we really have ever thought about what happens if someone puts a V-Union down on stream.
Because, yes, we do have slightly more limited space than a usual playmat, so the spacing here could be interesting. But interestingly, Japanese Pokemon official playmats are smaller than
okay, so maybe
Western
we're okay.
ones. So I think we're going to be just about okay with this V-Union.
As we see a ton of stuff chucked and the attach to the Pumpkaboo just to get it out of there basically. And a pass over to Owyn's side. Like we know now, especially with that switch pickup, we are guaranteed to see ourselves the V-Star come into the active and potentially even, could take this boss if they wanted.
There's some interesting options in there for sure. Or maybe the Pokegear for a bit more flexibility with their choice.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be the gear, but I mean, they also have access to the V-Star ability at this point, so
yeah, they can dip into the deck for whatever they fancy if they'd like to, and without fear of the Pumpkaboo knocking a path out or anything like that. I mean, I don't think the Pumpkaboo is particularly great in this matchup. It's
No.
not necessary.
No, and exactly, and what we'll see here as well is we can probably like see a KO for Owyn, maybe a response from Roberto. So we'll be weird to see how this goes. What I really love is that by taking the gear from that Mew, the Ultra Ball was like less of a minus from the hand, right? You can basically, it's kind of like, I don't need this. I can search for a card whenever I want.
Absolutely.
And now we see the boss.
Ooh, and then a Crobat for a fresh 6.
Yeah, so if they can hit them, the damage mod, they do need to hit their band for the KO here because of the double turbo energy. So
they need that extra 20 damage back.
Will be vital for them to find it. And
but they're going in for the V-Star ability to grab it with Starbirth instead.
Yeah, so we see the damage mod that is required. And at this point, it's a case of, okay, this is what I definitely need this turn. What else would help me?
Yes.
You know, like, what would be really good if I could have it? And
they've gone for the Ultra Ball?
I think that might have been the case. Gives them the access to the second V-Star.
And they've also got Ordinary Rod in hand. They did bin a few Bs at the beginning of the game. It's not an impossibility to bring those back in the hope that a special energy is played. Or Beedrill's second attack isn't that bad. Yeah. It's 110 damage for 1 energy still. You discard the energy, but you can grab it back with a Training Court nice and easily.
Yeah, so it might be, maybe they're thinking about setting that up over a couple of turns as they protect the card on the top of the deck.
The Flygon isn't very useful in this matchup, sadly, with it only doing extra damage if it's against a V-Max.
And V-Unions are not V-Maxes, so less helpful here. And I think, yeah, the fact that we see a B on top of the discard pile, I think Owyn is weighing up the, okay, is there a line that we can take in the next couple of turns that ends up with us Beedrilling?
Well, it might be why they were considering the Ultra Ball play in the first place, to thin that hand down, knowing that maybe they can hit a Mustard if they don't already have it in hand. I haven't had quite a thorough enough peek to know.
2 were in the opening hand.
Ah.
So there's only 1 left in deck.
Of course.
As we see, only 2 energy attachments to the RCS. We can see the other one in hand. And a Raihan now for Roberto. Basically saying, okay, cool. I still have the Arceus V-Star this turn.
Still a possibility.
They can now go search for whatever missing part they need. I think it's going to need to be an Ultra Ball.
Yeah, and then they can discard more pieces of that Mewtwo that are in hand.
And I'm thinking is if they have the Ultra Ball here, they can discard the last part of, or like second to last part of the V-Union, get it onto the bench, attach, attack, set up the V-Union, and then we're into uncharted territory, as far as I'm concerned.
It would be fantastic to see it get out on the field. I think I'd be gutted if we didn't see that V-Union in this game.
Like, I kind of want to see it now, and if we don't, it sucks. So, can we navigate these turns to get there? So, yep, there is the RCS coming down straight into the V-Star ability, searching for 2 cards.
Urshifu in hand, an interesting choice. It's definitely going to obviously hit the weakness on the Arceus, but where Roberto plays so many other different types, it's not quite as useful in this matchup.
No, and I think it's just there for if someone's playing the straight RCS lists. So okay, and I think that is maybe all of the V-Union. As
here he goes.
And Owyn's look at Owyn's head in hands going.
Oh.
So what's the game plan now as we see the mess that is a V-Union hit the board?
We've got to make sure we get those body parts in the right order.
Yeah. Well, because otherwise it makes an incomplete card, and it's hard to tell what's going on. But as it comes down, we now see Arceus has a really good target to accelerate energy onto, especially because, don't forget, one of these attacks does 16 damage counters. which means that you can pick off all sorts of stuff by hitting into a couple of things, softening them up, and then just going, cool, 16 damage counters, I win.
Absolutely, and the RCS already has damage on it, which is pretty scary. The only difficulty, to an extent, is there aren't any other possibilities for anything else to do bench damage right now. Roberto doesn't have any bench space. They don't use the Intellion engine. So those 16 damage counters would have to be very well placed and hopefully take more than one knockout in one turn.
Yep.
Unless you're going to spread it across 2 turns with 2 sets of 16 damage counters.
I mean, 310 is a lot
It
of hit
really
points. So
is.
this is not going to be an easy KO for Owyn to take. But the good thing is for him, for Owyn at least anyway, like with access to boss, you do have other routes, right? You can go KO on the Luminion, on the Articuno, win. You don't have to go the hard way through the giant Mewtwo, and by giant I mean it's 4 cards big.
Literally giant.
Yeah.
Interesting bench on the... Oh, considering benching the Urshifu, they're really not sure, as they are clearly concerned about the weakness on top of that Mewtwo V Union.
Yeah, I mean, it's only one attach away from this Mewtwo V Union just detonating everything for 300 anyway.
Yes.
So I don't know how much of a difference having something with a bit of weakness is going to be, but...
No, and of course, Cysplosion won't do any weakness,
Exactly.
So there's no concern there.
So we protect the card on top with Oranguru. Lovely way of playing around Marnie as well in this format, as we see the second V-Star hit the board. And gonna commit into this Urshifu. I think this is more to set up maybe some snipe damage, might be the reasoning. I'm trying to work it out. As we basically go ahead and set back up the potential Beedrill plays for later. As we go in and hit for 210. No energy in deck. Does still have to shuffle. I think, was that Owyn declaring the attack or not? I'm trying to work that out.
I think so.
Yeah.
There we go. There it is.
And
Loading up the Urshifu. There we go.
yeah. Does mean that you can now pick off this Arceus on the bench, assuming Roberto can't heal it, which I think is going to be a fairly safe assumption by the time you commit 4 spaces to your V-Union, plus the spaces to Adventurous Discovery. Having easy access to Sharon's Care becomes more difficult, especially with a full bench too.
Yeah, and if you're concerned about getting KO'd, that concern goes away a little bit when you promote the Mewtwo V Union, because if your opponent can't do bench damage, then actually that Arceus is pretty safe.
Mm-hmm. So in it comes.
It is a little bit squashed on the board.
Yeah, he's lost a bit of a leg. It looks like he's going to go instead after the Oranguru. Is this going to be basically...
Cysplosion.
Is this a Cysplosion turn of like stick this Oranguru active, Cyclode?
Maybe they're going to try and get the Oranguru trapped inactive and go for some bench damage, spread. We might see Mew and the Arceus potentially.
Yeah, I would say like you can take 3 prize cards instantly if you wanted to. Because if you do the 10 here for the KO, plus then the remaining damage to the Mew, you do get to take the double knockout, take 3 prize cards. Because the 6 damage counters don't make a huge difference elsewhere right now.
No, but the Oranguru having 2 retreat cost, unless they can find an out to that and to be able to switch it, and they can't accelerate to it this turn.
No, exactly. And just going through Owyn's list, in terms of switch outs, they have the 2 copies of Switch.
And Air Balloon.
And Air Balloons, and that's it, right?
Yes.
So, not a huge number of outs available to them. As I think,
without being able to use the Mew to search for those, well...
Yeah, I think Roberto's quickly just doing a ton of maths on this attack.
Figuring out what the best play would be. Oh, they're going for a little bit on the Urshifu.
Okay, so they're setting up numbers, I think, is the play here, right?
Maybe. Oh, my goodness. Could you imagine if they took 6 prize cards in one turn?
Well, that might be what Roberto's setting up here.
That would be so beautiful.
It would be the biggest flex I think I've ever seen.
I think they might be well setting up for it, trying to get that possibly. Oh no, they
Okay.
did go for the knockout in the end.
But they've split the damage to basically pick off the Mew later, should they want to. Does draw the air balloon off the top. Also had the Raihan, so could have searched it, but does top deck that air balloon to move that Oranguru.
Back.
I can't remember if they... No, because they had to shuffle for the energy search, so that was
Yeah.
not stacked by the Oranguru last turn. That was just drawn into.
Very lovely when that happens. But, I mean, they had options to hunt for
sure.
anyway. It was definitely the best card option for Roberto to bring forward, choosing Cysplosion. Anyway, with their boss's orders, if Roberto had no better supporter to play that turn.
Yeah, and we'll see the next boss.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to take out another 2 prize cards for Owyn. And it's basically, does he have another out for a third boss is basically the game that we then have to start playing.
Or potentially they could take 3 prize cards if they Urshifu VMAX and boss something else that can get KO'd from the active.
True.
So there's potential for a little bit more, but they've gone for the Articuno.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're Urshifuing yet.
No, goes in, has to set up the damage here. I actually like this line because we've seen the Ultra Ball in Owen's hand.
Yes.
Which means that if he hits in here, doesn't quite take the KO, all he needs to do at some point now is Ultra Ball, grab the Urshifu, win.
Yes,
so
they can just go ahead, G-Max Rapid Flow into the Articuno and the Arceus, taking 4 prize cards and sealing them.
Yeah.
Sealing them the win.
But the question is, what does Roberto say? Roberto says, damage counters everywhere, please. As we take the KO on the Mew.
Oh, and possibly, a
Yeah.
Oranguru.
So by doing this, you get rid of that pivot, right?
Yes. But they can still manual retreat the Arceus here. So it could be a little too late, sadly.
Yeah, as we see the Ultra Ball, we know the Urshifu VMAX was put back into deck.
That Urshifu committing to bench earlier looks like it was the right play.
Yeah, the retreat into the Urshifu, ping the damage for the bench to take the last 4 prize cards, and we see Owyn take that game 2-0. Really well played. And I think that shows really what Owen's game plan actually is with this deck. It's to take 1 KO, like a couple of KOs early with the bosses, take 2 prize cards, then go bang, bang, Urshifu to finish.
Yes, absolutely. Using Urshifu as a finisher in these sorts of games is a fantastic strategy, because there's not much your opponent can do about it unless they boss it early and take it. Possibly the V-Union could have.
Yeah.
They could have used that big 300 attack to have prevented any bench damage being done, especially because they knew they had a vulnerable Arceus on bench.
Yep. Well, and I think one of the interesting lines we have to think about here, though, is by playing the Urshifus here, we have to expect less mana fee.
Yes.
And a lot of the stuff with the text this weekend was a lot of people were talking about, okay, Jolteon's a bigger thing. So are we playing Jolteon? Are we changing our decks because of the Jolteon? Are we playing like outs to the Jolteon? Yes, no. Oh, we went, well, that's great. You go think about that. You're not thinking about mana fee, which means I'm going to go and play Urshifu because you've cut the mana fee. And I think that we see that payoff in spades here.
There are certainly lots of cards that people have had to sit and consider. Do I or don't I this week? There are so many different cards in format that can float in and out of decks seamlessly, that could make all the difference in one matchup but be completely useless in another.
Which is why I love these toolbox lists, and like we're in a format where toolboxy play is rewarded, because you can play these flex attackers, these one-off items and one-off supporters, just to be like steal the stuff. And I think that's a really nice kind of ability to have. And it is also one of the most skill testing formats that you can have. You take away that kind of, did I draw my out element, to, well, no, I'm just going to search the out when I want it. That will be enough.
Absolutely. And it's lovely when we can see the prize cards as the audience as well. We know whether they've got that out or not, and you see the life drain from their eyes as they do that first deck search.
I mean, I feel real bad for Roberto, though. He did at least get to show us the idea behind the Mewtwo V Union, and I can imagine the deck building process there was, well, we've seen Arceus plus VMAX of your choice, effectively,
Mm.
be a completely valid plan. Why stop at VMAX? Why not go bigger?
Absolutely. Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to see a V Union get play at a competitive level like this, because we haven't seen much of them, unfortunately, and there are only a very limited span of them in very particular types, with 2 being in lightning, 1 metal, 1 psychic, and 1 water.
I'm glad you did that list and not me, because I don't actually know.
No, they're fantastic. I think they're a really fun set of cards. They do a lot of damage. They've got high HP. Getting them into play is tough, but can be really rewarding.
No, and they're also a nice fun mechanic as well. And their drawback of having these high energy attack costs is not a drawback anymore, because RCS is just like, yeah, cool, I'm just going to accelerate.
Yeah, I can do that.
And off to the races they go. So will be good to see if there are other lists like that floating around this weekend. Will there be other cool attackers? We saw it last week in Lille, right, where we had the Gyarados V and VMAX, which is a different approach. Again, it's a, how are we going to make the most efficient use of attacks, and how can we leverage this acceleration in ways that is hard for our opponents to counter?
It's also interesting for somebody to be able to bring a list to a competitive event like this that people aren't expecting.
Yes.
Because they won't have tested against it. And so having to read those cards, look in that discard pile and see those V Union pieces can be pretty scary if you don't know what it does.
Yes. No.
We all know what the B does now.
Yeah.
Back in the first few bigger events, back IRL, we didn't see too many B-Drill around. Now everybody knows what B-Drill does. So you see that single strike mustard, you're thinking to yourself, is it a B-Drill?
Yep. And I think Stefan mentioned it in his winner interview after game 1. That element of surprise is a huge factor.
Absolutely.
Having that ability to make people go, well, what am I playing around? I actually don't know anymore. What are my outs? Because I don't know what they're even trying to do to me. That's a really scary spot to be in when you're sat down opposite it. And especially for these players who play a ton and are experienced players like Owyn, anytime you have to sit and read your opponent's card is sort of disorientating. You're not expecting to have to do that.
No, not at all.
So it is always kind of stressful to be like, well, make this up when we as we go along. But I think we're just going to go across now to interview with Owyn. And we'll find out what he thought of that matchup.
Thank you, Cass. Yes, so I'm here with our round 2 winner, Owyn. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
So I'm going to ask the obvious question. When you were sat down against Roberto and you just saw him discard the Mewtwo V Union pieces, what was going through your mind?
I had already seen Adventurous Discovery, so I kind of knew it was coming, but to face that at 1-0, or you see a Mewtwo V Union, you don't expect that to see at these tables. I mean, it's still early, but it's still a deck you don't expect to see.
No, not at all. We're all thinking the same thing. And were you familiar with the card at all? Like, had you seen it before? Did you know what it did?
I had once tested it for the same format with Adventurous Discovery as well, but not like his list. I played Galarian Meow or something. I did a very different list, so I kind of knew what it did, but I had to read just to be sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And was it? Cause it's always tricky because it's one thing to go up against a meta game deck, but when you're up against like a complete surprise like that, sometimes it can like throw you off. So what did you kind of sort of go up against something that you weren't as 100% familiar with? So what was kind of going through your mind to make sure that you still tackled the matchup in a way where you were sure that you'd be able to win?
Well, because I saw him bench a lot of 2-prizers early, like Luminia and Zapdos, I was like, okay, I can go for the boss game plan here, and that made it a lot easier already to, at least for the first game, to think what should I do. And then the second game where I had to discard a boss early, that's when you have to start thinking differently. So then I had to use my Urshifu VMAX, which wasn't sure. You of course don't want it to, because it's free prizes against Mewtwo V Union, but I had to, and it worked somehow.
Absolutely. So something I noticed whilst we're watching over the course of that game was that it seemed like in game 2, especially, Roberto benched his Zapdos V a little bit early, and then you were able to like pick it off. Was that kind of a vital moment, do you think, just being able to pick that off early to make sure that he can just surprise you with a KO on an Arceus?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was debating on bossing Sylveon there because I know it can evolve, and then it's not 2 free prizes anymore. But I thought killing the Zapdos is just more important, so it can give me a little more time to just set up and indeed go for the Urshifu game plan. So I think that was a vital point and a vital decision, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And then one last question. So we saw, of course, we were playing the Arceus Beedrill deck. This is a deck that we've seen be a bit more popular over in the US side, more things, but like it's kind of less so here in Europe. But now we see more and more players over here in Europe playing it as well. What drew you to play this deck today?
Well, I've been playing Beedrill all this whole format, honestly. I've started with this kind of type of Beedrill in Liverpool, and then played the same version as Magnus in EYC, and then I switched over to the Italian version because I saw that list from Rahul and Isaiah, etc. Just also felt really solid for Lille. And now I played this again because I was scared of Jolteon.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Jolteon is sort of cream back into the format, and obviously a deck like this is well poised against it, so it makes complete sense. Well, Owyn, thank you very much. Again, congratulations. Best luck for the rest of your rounds. And for everyone watching at home, we're going to throw to a break now, and then at some point we will be back with round 3, so don't go anywhere.